Okay, we are live, Chair.
Thank you. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to. Could Mr. Mayor, you mute, please? Thank you. You have been muted. Thank you. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this virtual Maldens and Coombe Planning Subcommittee meeting. And welcome to those members of the public watching on the Council's YouTube channel. I'm Councillor Simon Edwards. I'm chair of this meeting, and I'm a member of the Council for St James Ward, where two of the applications happen to be tonight. Just to reiterate that whilst you're not speaking, it's very helpful if everybody mutes their microphones, because that means there's no feedback or interference. And also it's helpful to, even when you are speaking, make sure your phones are off so that we don't get a mobile phone or something buzzing away in the background when you're speaking. As I said, we are now live on the Council's YouTube website, and a copy of the recording will be available on the channel shortly after the meeting. When members want to speak, I'd like them all to use the chat function, and use the chat function only to ask to speak and ask questions, because that way everybody hears your question. Whereas if you put a question in the chat function, the public won't see it. Now, just to say one or two things about the nature of tonight's hearing, tonight's meeting, I should say. We are solely dealing with planning matters tonight, and therefore we'll be applying the procedures and rules of planning law. They're quite tightly regulated, both in relation to who can speak and when and for how long, and also in terms of the decisions we come to. When we come to a decision on a planning application, we have to make that decision based on what's called the development plan. That is, in fact, a hierarchy of plans, sitting on top of which is the one set by the government, the National Planning Policy Framework. Below that is the London Plan, which is drawn up by the Mayor of London. Currently, there's one which is called the Intend to Publish London Plan, which will, when it's adopted, supersede the existing one. Because it is so near adoption, it's been through the process of public examination in public. What it says is more or less exactly the same as weight as what's in the existing one. And then we have our own local plan and the supplementary planning documents which sit beneath that as well. We take all of those into account, and we are also guided by statute and by the government's planning policy guidance and by case law. So it's a complex business, and we can only make decisions based on what are known as planning grounds. Although I appreciate that in relation to some applications, there is a very great deal of strength of feeling and a lot of objections sometimes, we are not allowed simply to make a decision based on the number or indeed the volume of the objections. So I move on now to introduce who's who. I'll introduce the councillors first, and if the councillors, when I introduce you, could just say hello or good evening or whatever you will, I'll just go through them in alphabetical order. So first we have Councillor Bailey, who is councillor for Coombe Ward.
Good evening, Chair.
Thank you. Then we have Councillor Bass, who's one of the councillors for Coombe Hill Ward.
Good evening.
We have then Councillor George, who is the other councillor tonight from Coombe.
Good evening, all.
We have then Councillor Haar, who's one of the councillors for Beverley Ward.
Good evening, everybody.
And we have Councillor Heap, who tonight is the other councillor from Beverley Ward.
Good evening, Chair.
We have Councillor Hughes, who's one of the councillors from Old Maldon Ward.
Good evening, everyone.
And Councillor Ravalia, who's the other councillor for Coombe Ward.
Evening, Chair.
And Councillor Shepherd, who's the other councillor tonight from Old Maldon Ward.
Good evening, everybody.
And last but not least, we have Councillor Wookie, who's with me, one of the councillors in St James.
Good evening, everyone.
We're also joined by some officers. I won't ask them to introduce themselves because you'll be hearing them later. As this is a planning meeting, you'll not be surprised to hear that we have a couple of planning officers. We have Harsha Bundia, who's our principal planner, and Thomas Franklin, who's a senior planning officer. From Democratic Services, we have Henry Yellop, who will be assisting me, and Fiona Cotter as well. And there are other officers providing IT support in the background. And I hope that that will make this meeting seamless. I have to say that our officers, particularly from Democratic Services, have been doing an absolutely fantastic job in making these virtual meetings work. And they have been working very well. It looks seamless, and I hope it will be seamless tonight, but it's an awful lot of work, and I do thank you for that. So far as public participation is concerned, I've mentioned that there is a registration scheme, and you have to register to speak, and the time available to speak is limited. And we do have tonight people register to speak on 2 of the 3 applications. And I hope, again, that will all go seamlessly. The first item on the agenda strictly is apologies for absence, if Henry, you could just deal with those who are absent and who is substituting.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Councillor Cobbett has sent his apologies. Councillor Wookie is attending as his substitute, and Councillor Shepherd is attending as substitute for Councillor Davis. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is declarations of interest. Before every meeting, we have to declare any interests we may have, whether pecuniary or personal, in any matter on the agenda. And so what I'll do is ask if any member has personal or pecuniary interests that they should declare in relation to any of the items on the agenda. So we only have to do this once. What I'll do is I'll allow a short pause for anybody who does have such an interest to declare to put their name in the chat function. That's good. Nobody has. So we will move to the minutes. The minutes of the last meeting, which was held on the 29th of September, were recently published on the RBK meetings website. And again, what I'll do is ask members of the committee through, if you like, a negative declaration to approve those as accurate so that I can sign them later. Again, if anybody's got anything they want to say about those minutes, if they can pop their name in the chat function now. Oh, well, that's fine. That means those minutes are approved, and I'll be able to sign them whenever. There's quite a backlog of those, of course. We now move to the meat of the evening and the planning items. There are 3 items on the agenda. We're going to take 27 Thetford Road first. As regards the other 2, on the running order on the agenda, it goes to Coombe Ridings and then Pressburg Road. But in fact, there are no speakers in relation to Coombe Ridings. And so I felt that it would be sensible to swap those 2 rounds. So after 27 Thetford Road, we'll move to considering the Pressburg Road application, and we'll do Coombe Ridings last. So the application is in relation, first application, item 1, is in relation to 27 Thetford Road. The planning officer who will be presenting this is Thomas Franklin, and so I now hand over him to present that item. And if I can just remind everybody, the application can be found at Appendix A in the agenda, page A4, and not on page A3. Thank you.
Hey, Chairman, just bear with me while I bring the presentation up. Are you able to see that?
Yes, Thomas, that's come up.
Thank you very much. So as you said, this application relates to 27 Thetford Road in New Malden. And the description is alterations and extensions to side and rear of existing single dwelling house at ground, first and second floor, and excavation at basement level to provide 6 self-contained flats, 2 1-bedroom, 2 2-bedroom, and 2 3-bedroom with associated waste and cycle storage facilities. This is an aerial photograph of the site. Site clearly marked there in the middle with Pressburg Road immediately opposite, and Thetford Road running in an arc here. This is another aerial view just taken at a slight angle. It's worth pointing out that this photo is of some age now. This is the site location plan, again, just showing what we've just seen in plan form. And this is a map of the heritage constraints around the site. So you can see that the site itself and much of the surrounding area is covered by the Thetford Road local area of special character. And then across the road from the site, we have the boundary of the Pressburg Road conservation area, which is the area marked in blue. This is a similar map, but showing the tree constraints on the site. This is mostly here just to show the absence of individual protected trees around the site. I know it shows there that the site itself is subject to an area TPO, but as I've said in my report, there was only 1 tree covered by that, which was lost in the 1987 storm and then not replaced. So as it stands, none of the trees on the site are protected. This is a map showing the fluvial and tidal flood risk around the area. This is zoomed out, showing quite a large area. So you can see that the site is quite a long distance away from any of the designated flood zones 2 or 3, which are the higher risk areas. This is a map showing the surface water flood risk to the site. And as you can see, the rear garden of the site itself and neighbouring gardens as well do have a low risk from surface water flooding. This is a view of the front elevation taken from just opposite the site. This is in the foreground, the junction of Pressburg Road and Thetford Road. This is a view of the rear elevation with number 25 on the right and number 29 on the left. This is a similar view, just with more of a focus on number 25. And again, taken from the same point, looking towards number 29. This is a view looking directly across the garden towards 29. The principal purpose of this photo is to show the tree that's going to be felled. This is the only tree that is currently proposed to be felled as part of the scheme. And these are some of the trees to the rear of the site, which I suspect we may return to later. And this is a photo which just shows the amount of current separation between number 25 and the application site. This is the existing site plan. And here we have the existing ground floor plan. This shows the existing cellar or basement level and the existing first floor on the right. And then we have the existing loft and roof plans. This is the existing front elevation with number 29 on the right, 25 on the left. And the rear, 25 this time on the right, 29 on the left. And this is the side elevation viewing from 29 Thetford Road. And this is the existing section. So to recap, the proposed development is essentially for the erection of extensions and alterations, including excavation of an enlarged basement to facilitate conversion from a single family dwelling into 6 flats. The mix of housing would be 2 1-bed, 2 2-bed, and 2 3-bed. All of them would meet the overall GIA requirements as set out in the national standard. Both of the 3-bed units would have private gardens, which measure 116 metres squared and 127 metres squared. The policy requirement for those gardens would be 14 and 15 metres squared, respectively. The 2 and 1-bed units on the upper stories wouldn't have any private outdoor space, but would have use of a communal garden, which would measure 250 metres squared, and that's well over double what the policy requirement would be. The existing site has 2 vehicular accesses, one of which is proposed to be removed and the curb reinstated, which would create an additional parking space on the street. And off-street, there would be 2 car parking spaces in the forecourt of the property. So this is the proposed site plan. You can see at the bottom, that's where the existing vehicular access would be removed with the curb reinstated. And then at the top, you can see the retained vehicular access. Other points to note are the bin storage, which would be located at the front, and then the cycle storage at the rear. This is the proposed basement and the proposed ground floor plan. And the basement area that I just showed is part of flat 1. It's not an independent, it's not a separate unit. It's part of this duplex unit here. Is the proposed first floor plan. And then the second floor plan. This is the proposed front elevation, showing the measurements of the single-story wraparound extension here, and then the 2-story side and rear extension here. This is the rear elevation, and here just showing the height of the eaves of the extension, which will be up against the boundary with number 29. This is the northeast elevation, again showing height of the eaves here, and then the height of the single-story wraparound. And then we have the view from the other side and the section. This is here just to show the existing separation distances. So you can see there's quite a lot of separation towards the front of the site between 25 Thetford Road and the application property, approaching 8 metres. At the back, because of the single-story element which comes off to the side, the gap is a bit smaller, at about 2.25 metres at the closest point. And then we can see the proposed separation distances. So you can see the effect of that two-story and single-story extensions coming out to the side, reducing those gaps. This is the proposed cycle storage, which would be located in the communal garden at the rear of the site. And these are the proposed waste and recycling facilities, which will be up along the front boundary of the site behind a laurel hedge. And the recommendation is that planning permission should be granted, subject to the conditions and legal agreement as set out in the officer's report, agenda papers and update papers, and to delegate to the head of development management acting any subsequent changes to conditions and legal agreements. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Tom. If I can now move to the members of the public who've registered to speak. We hear from the objectors first. There are 2 people registered, or two groups of people registered to speak for the as objectors. There's Mr. Jim Dunster, who happens to live at one side of the property, and Tanya and Gary Clarence, who happen to live the other side. I understand that it's been agreed that they will share the time between themselves equally. So Mr. Dunster will speak for 2.5 minutes, and Mr. and Mrs. Clarence for 2.5 minutes between them. What we'll do is divide that time, and so you each have exactly 2.5 minutes, and making 5 minutes between. Now, as I understand it, it will be Tanya and Gary Clarence first, and what I've asked is that your 2.5 minutes will be timed from when you start speaking, when you're comfortable and settled in and started speaking. And I've asked that you be warned when you've got 30 seconds left. So it's really now over to Henry Yallop to introduce you and make sure that works. So Henry, can you take over now? Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. We have these two registered objectors. So first, Tanya and Gary Clarence will be speaking as the first objector. Welcome to the meeting. Please, can you now address the committee with your comments? Just to remind you again that you have 2.5 minutes to speak, and we'll let you know when you have 30 seconds remaining and when your time is up. So if you'd like to unmute yourself and oh, there we go. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the Council. As has been addressed, we are the residents, myself and my wife, Tanya Clarence, are the residents of number 29 Thetford Road. It's the adjoining property. It's a semi-detached property to the proposed development we are talking about now. And we have submitted 3 sets of objections, written objections, but given the time frame, I will just deal with the sort of 2 fundamental objections we have today. The first is really the proposed gross overdevelopment of the property concerned, and the sort of primary focus of the planning department so far on sort of meeting political targets. I acknowledge Councillor Edwards' opening remarks in terms of the restrictions we have in terms of planning and what we need to take into consideration. But part of tonight's committee is to hear objections, valid objections from the residents. And we believe that it's imperative on the council to consider those objections reasonably in the light of all the planning applications to date. So the nine residents were notified of the proposals, and to our knowledge, we've had over 66 objections from residents to the proposal. I'm not sure, and I take into account Councillor Edwards' comments at the beginning, but I'm not sure how many objections the council needs to get a clear understanding of where the residents are about an overdevelopment, and in particular, a basement development, simply to add additional units to the property for no other purpose other than sort of developer profit. We would have no objection. We're completely cognizant of the government's targets of housing and very sympathetic to those. A development of 3 or 4 properties on the site would be absolutely supported, and I think would probably be supported by most of those residents that are concerned. But
30 seconds remaining.
Oh, Sherbert. Okay. The second more fundamental concern is the basement itself. And in principle, the lack of planning policy that Kingston has in relation to basement developments. Most other councils have developed policies for basements, yet we don't have that here. And the biggest concern that we have in this property is we are aware of very high water tables in this area. We know the hydrology report found water less than a metre down. And as a result, there has been no fundamental basement assessment study taken onto this. And this should be a prerequisite to any.
I'm afraid I've got to stop you now. Thank you. And may I say, before we move to Mr. Dunster, I know I and every other member of the committee has read your written objections as well. So don't feel that we don't know what you say, because we do. Thank you. And now over to Mr. Dunster.
Good evening, councillors. I'm Jim Dunster, a resident and neighbour of the proposed development at 27 Bedford Road. Whilst the planners have generously allocated 80 pages trying to justify how each objection to the scheme can be interpreted as policy compliant, the reality of the proposal is that there is extreme overdevelopment and requires compromises the planners have simply chosen to ignore. These are the inclusion of an excavated basement that requires the majority of the external walls to be resupported on new structure on a site with known ground surface water and flooding issues. The basement works are likely to substantially degrade the building structure and require permanent pump drainage to sewers to try and prevent flooding. It will double the carbon footprint of the development by adding 45 tonnes of embodied carbon, excluding the 50 lorry visits. It cannot be morally justified for 2 poor amenity bedrooms when the council has recently declared a climate emergency. The extensions and additions to the property fail to transition the building line and follow the bend in the road at both the front and the rear. The flats have poor quality access to impractically planned accommodation, and flat 2 is the only accommodation that's suited for family and disabled living, but has a front door down a narrow single file alley which is shared with cyclists and tenants, and all below a kitchen extract from number 25. There are just 2 parking spaces, one of which is unviable as it's inches away from a bedroom window and results in up to 5 additional vehicles to be parked in the road at a dangerous and congested junction. The developer proposes to retain the single glazed sash windows and has made no allowance for internally insulating existing walls, and will not be capable of delivering the 19% in-use carbon reduction. This scheme, if approved, will set a new precedent for the unsatisfactory conversion of one half of a semi-detached property whose negative structural, acoustic, sustainability and amenity impacts will now be considered an acceptable development model that will be adopted at scale by developers across the borough. Please resist the temptation to think that any vague planning conditions will in any way protect residents from the very real risks that they will be exposed to when a cost-driven developer builds a technically complex, structurally intrusive and unavoidably leaky basement reliant on permanently pumped drainage. As the planners have ignored all the evidence supplied by neighbours and residents concerning the reality of ground and surface water flooding and preferred to accept the findings of boreholes conveniently carried out at the end of a dry summer, you are left with a choice as to whether to accept the advice from residents who have experienced annual conditions over decades, or the interested conclusions of
30 seconds remaining.
As the applicant has owned the property for more than a year and his initial application tried to avoid carrying out boreholes, who have anticipated the most favourable time to do them was at the end of a dry summer, you must draw your own conclusions, but I do not accept the real conditions of the site to have been accurately portrayed. As there are so many concerns over the amenity and the safety of this development, I suggest that the application is either deferred or passed in principle with the basement excluded. As a 5-flat development with proper gardens, flat access and respecting building lines, it would have a lot less objections. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dunster. If you and Mr. and Mrs. Clarence can remain in the meeting, please, because there may be questions for you after we've heard from the applicants. So if I can ask Henry again, if you can introduce the applicants, and I think that although we have 2 people speaking, they're going to divvy the time up between them. So we'll just this time we're just timing the 5 minutes all the way through. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We have Headley Miller and Kelly Rose tonight who have registered to speak on behalf of the applicant. Welcome to the meeting. Please can you now address the committee with your comments? You're reminded that you have 5 minutes to speak. We will let you know when you have 1 minute remaining and when your time is up. Thank you.
Hello, committee, and hello to everyone present. Yeah, I will be speaking on behalf of the applicant along with my colleague Kelly. I just wanted to give a brief overview of the development, which Thomas Franklin did very well. The applicant has sought to develop the site in a sustainable way using existing developed locations to deliver more homes that it is acknowledged the borough needs. I want to touch on a few particular objections that were raised. I will look at design and the basement, and then I'll hand over to my colleague Kelly, who will touch on the car parking, because that was also raised. So the applicant has sought to take a very considered approach to design. This development presents the opportunity to balance the semi-detached pair, which have become unbalanced through the extensions to 29. So the proposed side extensions at 1st and 2nd floor level will restore balance to the semi-detached property, and then the additional first ground floor extensions, more modern design, will be set to the back and will be read as a separate issue. So in that prominent location, what the development will allow a restored pair of semi-detached houses. And notwithstanding the points about the poor quality of the design, it's because this is excellent opportunity just to improve the appearance of the borough. And the quality of the accommodation has also been forefront of the applicant's mind. As Ms. Franklin set out, all the units meet space standards and all have been provided with above standard level of outdoor amenity space. It is acknowledged that it's basement development, but this is not, as Mr. Franklin pointed out, not a sole unit. It will be bedrooms of units that also cover the ground floor, so they'll have proper outlook of ground floor, and given the light well, given the southwesterly facing aspect, they'll have adequate light within the basement rooms as well. And I'd also like to touch on the basement impact study. So that the boreholes were done when they were done because they were done in response to representation. So the applicant has sought to address concerns when they were raised. Our basement consultant didn't feel it necessary initially to do so. So as part of the boreholes, water was found on the site and as acknowledged. However, as part of the area to be constructed with the basement, no groundwater was found, suggesting it's a localized problem that will be avoided by the basement. Moreover, it is accepted there is a need to provide additional construction evidence to show it be built stably. Mr. Franklin has mentioned that in his report and is happy for it to be covered by condition. And obviously, as part of that, the applicant will provide the necessary details to provide the council with confidence that the basement construction will be stable. As he points out, that is something the council has determination over, and that is something we will seek to meet. Now, to talk on the issue of car parking, I will hand over to my colleague, Kelly.
Good evening, everyone. I'm a chartered transport planner with 17 years experience, and I've been appointed by the applicant to provide transport and highways advice throughout the application process. My assessment has shown that the development will increase demand for existing on-street parking by 2 spaces as a maximum, and the council officers have agreed with this assessment. Furthermore, my assessment has concluded that the streets immediately adjacent to the site have ample spare capacity, around 48%, and can therefore easily accommodate this level of overspill parking without creating unacceptable levels of parking stress for existing residents. Again, the council officers have agreed with this conclusion. The applicant has agreed to additional transport measures that were recommended by the council's transport officer. This includes the funding of a car club membership for 2 years.
1 minute remaining.
For each new dwelling. This is likely to be successful in encouraging car club usage, given there is actually a car club bay operated by Zipcar just 40 metres away from the site. In addition, the development will be car capped, thereby preventing new residents from obtaining on-street car parking permits in the event that a controlled parking zone is implemented in the future. These measures, alongside the high quality secure cycle parking within the site, will support the sustainable travel and reduce private car ownership and usage. I've also looked closely at the matter of highway safety to ensure that the safety of all road users is not compromised. The on-site parking area has been designed to ensure cars can turn safely within the site and exit in forward gear. One vehicle access will be closed off, which minimises the number of conflicting movements. And also the retained access is shifted over slightly away from the eastern boundary, thereby improving vehicle and pedestrian visibility displays. Altogether, these measures ensure highway safety is not compromised and in fact offers highway safety benefits compared with the existing layout.
Unmute. Yes, that's good. Thank you very much. The next stage in the proceedings tonight is for councillors to ask questions of the objectors, and after that the applicants. There's a 5-minute period allowed for this for each of the for the objectors and 5 minutes for the applicants. And so what I'll do first, if I may, is ask councillors to indicate in the chat function whether they have any questions of the objectors, and bearing in mind that I might have a question, but I won't let you know until I ask it. So can councillors please indicate in the chat function whether they wish to ask any questions of the objectors? Right, I don't see any yet, but oh, I do. Let me see. That's Councillor Bass. From when Councillor Bass starts speaking, can Fiona, you please time the 5-minute mark. So, Councillor Bass, over to you.
Okay, question for Mr. Dunster. It was about the scale and mass of the development. I mean, obviously, it's a fairly similar size. I mean, I went on site visit. What they're proposing is a fairly similar size to next door at 29. I just wondered if you would just kind of expand a bit more about which particular bit of the sort of scale and mass that you were particularly concerned about.
Yes, I can. Essentially, because the street is on a curve, on a transition, you really need the building line has to follow round. And I think part of the plans that have been shown for number 27 are a little bit misleading, because actually the building line needs to follow the 2-storey element of the building, not the bay windows. So the plans seem to show the bay window line, which is a single-storey addition to our house, are the building line. They're not. And actually, it's the little box which sits on the front of the hip, which is also an addition anyway to number 29, which causes it to cross the building line at the north facade of the street facade. It also oversails at a similar box that's tacked on to just as a sort of area grab at the back, also oversails as well. If you remove both of those little boxes, which I think would actually improve the look of the massing anyway, it would read a lot more clearly. I don't think pure symmetry is really the issue here that's needed. It's simply conforming to the building line, and there's no reason not to do that. It just loses a little bit of area.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dunster. Councillor Bailey, please. Could you ask your question?
Hello, yes, I've got a question for Mr. Dunster as well. It concerns the concern about the basement and possible flooding issues. I understand that it is an existing basement that's being extended. I'm just wondering if there has been any flooding issues. I don't know if you have a similar basement in your property. Is that a concern?
We don't have any basements in our property, and I think it's wrong to describe the existing property as having a basement. It's got a crawl space, which was accessed, I think, to a coal cellar. Right. It really isn't a basement, and I think that's misrepresenting what the existing building has. To be honest with you, there are no basements. I don't think we're aware of any basements really in the road, or anyone that had small basements or coal cellars has had to fill them in because they flooded. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. If nobody else has any questions, I've got one for Mr. Dunster as well. Mr. Dunster, I don't know if you've been able to look at the late material and the amendment to Condition 7, which now would read, if we granted permission, prior to the commencement of any excavations or subterranean development, a revised strategy taking into account the impact of the proposed basement, and to ensure that the drainage system will reduce runoff from the site to greenfield rates, and associated design, management and maintenance plan for surface water drainage at the site using SUDS methods shall be submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority. I don't know if you've seen that.
I haven't had a chance to read that. It came so late, I'm afraid. But in essence, my answer is that there's a little bit of a confusion here about what the SUDS scheme, Sustainable Urban Drainage Scheme, is actually capable of achieving. The two issues are that the assumptions made in the basement report are it's a watertight basement, reasonably watertight basement, which isn't very achievable with an underpin structure, which is cast in 2 hits. It's a very leaky box that you'll end up with, and also that any water currently in the basement reports is pumped into the surface into the combined sewer. And that really isn't allowed. Thames Water won't allow that, and the assumptions are that it's only small quantities of water, but it could actually be quite substantial, because when you build a large hole,
1 minute remaining,
it will attract water. So I don't think the basis of the current design is legal, to be honest. I don't think the drainage strategy is legal, and something's wrong here.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions of the objectors? Because I think we're more or less. Oh, Councillor Bass, you may have a few seconds left.
Just a question for Mr. Clarence. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I just wondered if you had any comments on the building line at the back, because I noticed one of the bits that juts out by a considerable amount is next to your property on the building line.
Hi, Councillor Bass. Just to answer that, hi. It is very concerning, as Mr. Dunster spoke about the massing. I think the increase in size of the property at number 27 will be 66% of the current property as it stands, the current footprint. Our property here was already double-sided when we bought it.
Thank you. I'm afraid I've got to stop you there. We only had a few seconds. That concludes questions of the objectors. If those objectors would like to mute their microphones, if I haven't already done so, that would be great. The next stage in the proceedings is for the questions of the applicants. And so again, I would invite councillors just to put their names in the chat function to indicate whether they have any questions of the applicants. And then there'll be 5 minutes, which I'd ask Fiona to time from when the first questioner, who will be Councillor Heap, begins the question. So Councillor Heap, the floor is yours to ask questions of the applicants, and 5 minutes will run from when you start to ask your questions. Your question, I should say.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, a dugout basement development is quite novel in this area and also in Kingston, I think I'm right in saying, and perhaps puts us and neighbours of surrounding properties a little bit out of our comfort zone. So could you tell the committee what experience you have in this field? Thank you.
Yeah, so the basement construction report has been prepared by a qualified professional who has sort of years of experience designing these kinds of schemes and assessing the underlying geology for the suitability of such a construction. So he's brought his professional experience to bear in analysing the data he's got from the boreholes and from the records, and is confident that a basement could be sustainably and stably built in this location.
Thank you.
Can I have a follow-up question, please?
Councillor Heap's questions.
Yeah. Sorry, a follow-up, please, Chair.
Yeah.
Yeah. To the applicant, Mr. Mellor. I'm talking about you as the developer or the developer, whoever you're speaking on behalf of. Thank you. How many of these types of dugout developments have you actually done, is my question.
So I'm a planning consultant working on behalf of the applicant, and we have sort of innumerable number of basement developments within London as a whole, including a development for a new house in Kingston with a basement, which had similar drainage issues, which we are able to solve through the implementation of a SUD scheme.
Thank you. I think that probably answers the question. Councillor Shepherd, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. My question is regarding the parking. I'm very curious to understand how you have come to the conclusion that it will only add 2 extra cars on the street. To give you an example, I'm a household of 6, and if we were to buy one of the 2-bedroom flats that you're proposing for 6 adults or to 6 people, you would have 5 cars immediately. Unfortunately, that's just the way it is. We work, we use our vehicles, and I don't see how developers are able to sell flats and tell people that they can't have cars. They will have cars, and they will park them on other roads. So I just really need to understand how you're coming to these figures. Thank you.
Okay, so we've looked at the car ownership data taken out of the 2011 census for Kingston upon Thames, which shows that 75% of households in the authority own a car. We've then applied that to the 6 residential units, which gives you an estimated parking demand of 4 to 5 cars. You have 2 parking spaces within the site, which gives an on-street parking demand of 2 to 3 cars. We're creating an additional on-street parking space by removing one of the vehicular accesses, which then gives you the maximum of 2 additional on-street demand as a result of that calculation.
Sorry, can I just
Does that answer your question?
Well, can I follow up by saying that's really unrealistic, because I can look at my own street. We have vehicles.
As a comment, really, we're on questions now, so you'll have plenty of time to make a comment, Councillor Shepherd, and we need to accommodate questions from others as well. Councillor Wookey, please. You may have a few seconds left. Councillor Wookey.
Sorry, I wanted to ask a question about sustainability and the fact that you're not going to replace the sash windows with double glazing, or obviously sash window double glazing.
Yes, perhaps you could answer that and just say, how are you going to achieve the reduction that we will require, given what Councillor Wookey has said about sash windows? And can you do that?
So, yes. So retention of sash windows is simply because they're in perfectly working condition. They're, heritage features of the property, and just for the appearance, they're best to be retained. And they have been being restored by works on site. And obviously all new build parts of the property will be built up to sort of standard building regs, insulation terms, in terms of the windows, in terms of heat loss and things like that.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure that we've got much time left.
No,
Fiona,
Chair. Yeah, time's up, Chair.
Thank you very much, Fiona. Well, that concludes questions of both the applicants and the objectors, and that's actually the conclusion of their participation in the meeting. We now move to the next stage of the meeting, which is that we go back to our planning officer. That's Thomas Frankland, who will sweep up, having taken into account what's been said during the addresses by the objectors and the applicants, and in the question and answer sessions. So, Thomas, can you come back online and sweep up, please?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Chair. I think the first thing to pick up on is a lot of the basement issues. I think the first thing to say is I think it might be slightly unfair to say that most other councils have basement policies. Certainly none of the councils that I've worked at have had basement policies. However, lots, particularly in London, including Merton, where I used to work, do have supplementary planning guidance dedicated entirely to basements. I don't think we have any sort of weak hand in assessing this because of the lack of a dedicated supplementary planning document for basements. Because all those documents really do is bring together existing policies on the matters which are relevant to basement development. And those are flood risk, drainage, land stability, and neighbouring amenities. Now, we have in our own local plan and in the London plan and at the national level, lots of policies which cover all of those issues. And officer's recommendation in this case is based upon application of those policies. I think it's also worth saying that it's not as if we have less information than we would have liked in this case either. The applicant has actually provided us with just about all the information that a local planning authority could ask for in these cases. A key example being a site-specific flood risk assessment, which they were under no obligation to provide because of the constraints on the site, but they chose to provide one nevertheless. So I just wanted to cover that off. I think it's also worth saying, related to that point, that the applicant didn't resist drilling boreholes. It's worth pointing out that, again, they weren't under any obligation to provide it, and the timing of it was simply a result of that's when I asked, and then they went and did it. I think I've covered off most of the issues with the basement. The only other thing I wanted to clarify is that water was found in one of the boreholes at a depth of 800 mil. I just wanted to make that absolutely clear. Moving on to the other issues, I think disabled access, that was covered off in the late material. And I wanted to pick up on the on the census data for the parking assessment. I appreciate that, we all know of households where they have a lot of cars, but at the same time, some do not. And the standard approach and the only evidence-based approach that we can go with is to use the census data and apply it to the development. It would be unreasonable for us to suggest that every single occupant of every single unit will own their own car. I also wanted to pick up on the existing building line. On my assessment, the existing building, the two-storey part of it, does breach the building line that Mr. Dunster was talking about. And the final thing I wanted to pick up on was related to structural stability. So we've had quite a lot of representations about that. That is picked up principally by the building control regime and is not really a planning consideration. I appreciate that residents will have concerns about it, but we don't want to duplicate regimes, and we have to assume that the other regimes that we have in place will be effective. So structural stability should be picked up by building control. Likewise, the safety of the development is chiefly the responsibility of the developer, but also the health and safety executive would get involved if there was a particular issue. So that's not something that we should be considering here today. And I think that's it, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thomas. The next stage of the meeting is questions from the committee members to the officer, Mr. Thomas Franklin. Before we move to that, however, I missed out asking the objectors and the applicants to leave the meeting, and if they want to follow it, please follow it on the council's YouTube channel. That's for technical reasons, because if we have a lot of people on, that can interfere with the connection, and it's important that we keep everybody connected, so to speak, who has to be connected. So could those remaining of the objectors and applicants in relation to 27 Thetford Road please now leave the meeting on the link and then watch it hereafter on the YouTube channel. So I'd ask you to do that, please. So now we have an opportunity for committee members to ask questions of the officer, Mr. Thomas Franklin, and I'd ask you to indicate your desire to ask questions in the chat function. This is a really obviously questions sometimes overlap a little bit with comments, and that's not a problem, but we will obviously also have an opportunity afterwards to make comments in the general debate on the motion to approve this, which will be hereafter moved. So if you could indicate in the chat function, please, now whether you have any questions for Tom Franklin. And we start with Councillor George.
Thank you. I wasn't going to mention it really, but you've sort of mentioned it just now, and it's got me wondering. The borehole. We were told that it didn't actually need to be done, but they did it anyway because they were asked for it. And then they found some water in as we were told, a time of year where you'd expect less water to be there. And then nothing seems to come from that. You know, we don't know why or what. There's nothing further to actually find out what it was. So it makes me wonder what the point it was. If we're digging there, we found a potential problem, and yet don't seem to be doing anything about it, or just say, well, okay, well that's interesting, and leave it at that.
The principal reason we asked for it was because we received a great many representations which said that it's absolutely not satisfactory to rely on very old logs from some distance from the site. So principally, it was to give residents, to put them at a bit more ease about it, and indeed, if anything did come up, to inform the authors of the 2 reports which have been written in support of the application and have the conclusions amended as necessary. As to why those conclusions didn't change, I think it's worth pointing out that although water was found at one of the boreholes, water wasn't found at the other 2, including the borehole which was drilled immediately over the site of where the basement is going to go. Beyond that, I mean, I don't want to speculate too much because I'm not qualified to make those assessments. So yes, I have checked out the firm that has written these reports. They are suitably qualified with the qualifications that we would want. And I don't actually have any evidence to suggest that their conclusions are false. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. The next question, I think, comes from Councillor Bass.
Yes. I'm not sure whether you know the answer to this one. I mean, lots of people have mentioned about whether there was any existing flooding in the existing cellar. It was mentioned by a few, but I didn't really get an answer to that. I just wondered if you could add anything to that about whether there already is some sort of flooding or damp in the cellar.
I'm not aware of any, but I haven't been down there.
Thank you, Councillor Bass. Are there any more questions from the committee of the officer before we move to debate and discussion after I've moved the motion? Okay, we can, Councillor George again. As I say, we can always come back during the debate if something arises.
Yeah, thank you. Just going on to sort of a more general thing really about housing density. I mean, just looking at it, it looks a very dense thing for the site. I'm reading the report. Let's talk about policy 3.4, the London plan. It says to take into account local context and character, establish design principles and public transport capacity. To me, then you go on to mention, you do like some sort of maths thing and come up with what it should be, but it doesn't seem to me, it doesn't seem to take into account local context and character and establish design principles. You know, to me that hasn't been taken into account when saying that sort of density for that particular house in that particular place is. Just wonder if you could reply on that. Thanks.
Yes, I certainly can. This is quite an interesting subject, and I could talk about it at length. I think I've been clear in my report that applying the density table in the London plan, this proposal would exceed those recommended figures. Now, the first thing to point out about that is that the density matrix in the London plan separates, distinguishes between different settings for sites, so suburban, urban, and central. Now, I have done my assessment on the basis that the setting is suburban. If I were to make the assessment on the basis of it being urban, it would actually fall directly within the recommended range. I've made it on the basis that it's suburban on the basis of our character study, because it is described as a suburban neighbourhood. But it does actually meet many of the criteria in the London plan for urban, principally because of its proximity to New Malden town centre. So that's the first point I would make. The second point I would make is about the intent to publish London plan, which Councillor Edwards spoke about earlier. in that they've completely done away with this density matrix. The reason being that since it was adopted, only 25% of applications in London have actually fallen within those recommended ranges. And the approach that they introduce in the Intent to Publish London plan is what's called a design-led approach, which essentially says, if you have a development which meets other objectives in the plan, i.e. It looks acceptable, it has an acceptable impact on neighbours, the standard of the accommodation is good, then if you've achieved the maximum number of units that you can whilst meeting those objectives, then you have achieved the optimum density. And what I would say here is, in my view, we do have a development which has an acceptable impact on the character and appearance of the area, has no impact on nearby heritage assets or an acceptable one in the case of the local area of special character. The standard of the proposed accommodation is good, and there's a very limited impact on the amenities of neighbouring occupiers in terms of loss of daylight or sunlight, overbearing impact. And it seems to me that if we were to increase the units any further as part of the proposal, then some of those things might change. So that's why I'm sort of saying that although it is above, strictly speaking, the London Plan density matrix, I think we probably have achieved the optimum density here. And to address more directly your question about taking into account character and context, if we're talking just about design, the real overriding consideration for me is the balance that it restores to the pair. At the moment, we have quite a lopsided property. We would restore a sense of balance to that, with the exception of the small wraparound single-story extension. I say small, I mean small when viewed from the front. It is a fairly substantial extension overall. But viewed from the front, you'll see a 2 metre wide front face. And it will retain its appearance as, even though it won't be a single family dwelling, it will still have only one front door facing the road. You wouldn't, if you were passing by, necessarily think, oh, there are 6 flats in there, because you would still have a single front door and a couple of parking spaces at the front. So I think all of that together, well, I hope answers your question. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. In the absence of any other questions, but I'm not stopping questions, obviously, I've got a couple to ask. They're principally about the lake material. The first one concerns the question I asked Mr. Dunster and his answer to it. You have included in the lake material an amendment to condition 7, which specifies that the drainage strategy, I paraphrase, shall ensure that the drainage system will reduce runoff from the site to greenfield rates. I think Mr. Dunstan's answer to that is that's simply not possible, because the amount of water that will have to be pumped out of the basement will be too large, and that he considers that Thames Water just simply won't allow that to happen. What do you say about the effectiveness or otherwise of condition 7 as revised, and Mr. Dunster's response to that?
Okay, well, I think the first thing to say is that officers are in agreement with local residents that it is not acceptable for large volumes of water to be pumped directly into the sewer simply because a basement is proposed. But in terms of the evidence that we have, and I think it's worth pointing out that the detailed design of the basement and the SAD scheme has yet to be done. What we have at the moment for both is a strategy which will inform the detailed design if members are minded to grant permission. The evidence that we have is a firm of two sets of structural, geotechnical engineers and specialists in SUDS design say that this is feasible. And we have no basis on which we could reasonably resist that. The protection that we can offer to residents in the event that, as Mr. Dunster has said, it turns out not to be feasible, well, they can't build, the way the condition is worded, they cannot do any excavations until they show us that it is feasible. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. That answers my first question. In relation to the second question, in the lake material, you produced some evidence concerning traffic accidents at the site. Can you briefly, because I don't know whether everybody who's listening, or I'm sure all members will have seen the lake material, perhaps not everybody who's listening has seen the lake material. Can you briefly summarise, please, what that reveals about traffic accidents in the vicinity of the site?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, officers examined road traffic accident data around the junction of Pressburg Road and Thetford Road, principally in response to the number of comments we had that the junction is dangerous. What we found is that there have been 3 minor accidents in the immediate vicinity of the junction since 1999, where the accidents are categorised as either slight, severe or fatal. So we've had 3 slight accidents in 21 years. There is a slight caveat to add to that, which is to say that although these are official figures taken from the Department for Transport, the only figures included are those which are reported to the police. And it is known that there are many accidents which aren't severe, which end up not getting reported to the police. I do have that caveat to add, but the evidence that we've seen shows that it's not an especially dangerous junction. Thank
you. And just lastly, from me anyway, on questions related to that, in relation to highways matters, which includes parking, can you remind us of what the National Planning Policy Framework says about how we should take decisions in relation to highways matters, which include parking? Can you remind us about that, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It says that planning permission should only be refused or proposals resisted on highways grounds if there'd be an unacceptable impact on highway safety, or if the residual cumulative impact on the road network would be severe.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of Mr. Thomas Franklin from members? I don't see any in the chat now. Now, the next stage of the proceedings is that we debate this amongst ourselves. Obviously, questions sometimes form part of the debate, and it's a bit of a continuum, but there is a formal separation between the two. And to mark that separation, we have to formally move the motion that the recommendation that our officer has given in relation to this item, number 1 on page A1, is approved. I make that, I do formally move it. I stress that that doesn't necessarily show which way I'm going to vote, but it has to happen. May I have a seconder, please?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Thank you. And now we can move to the debate. And again, can councillors please indicate in the chat function whether they want to speak any more than they have done already in questions. Thank you. Well, while we wait for Councillor George has popped in. Thank you, Councillor George.
Thank you. Just comments really. I still have trouble with the density of this particular house. Pretty much what I said before. It was answered well by the officer, but there was talk about suburban, you know, and whether it is suburban. You know, to my mind, it is suburban. However, the way we're going, it will soon be urban, as will most of the places around here. And the fact that it exceeds it is concerning to me. And in a way, you know, just looking at that house and the number of dwellings and the number of bedrooms, to me, you know, you almost don't need those figures, because it just doesn't feel right, and it doesn't, you know, which takes me back to, doesn't take into account the local context and character. It was mentioned about it would bring more of a balance to the house. But again, you know, we're doing one thing that leads to another. We build an extension. We're told it doesn't set a precedent, but it obviously does, because then you want to build something more to make it fit in with something, you know, and we just carry on, and we just urbanisation the whole place. So I'm very concerned about that. There's a shortfall of a private amenity space, which is made up by, right at the back, sort of separated general amenity space. I mean, again, this sort of rather goes, knowing Kingston as I do, and I've lived in many flats in Kingston, all around Kingston, which have all shared amenity space. Shared amenity space like this, it just won't be used. People will not get used to that amenity space because it's not right outside their door. You know, it's very, it might well work on a report, but I know in Kingston, those sorts of places do not get used. There's a lack of private amenity space, and that all goes back to it's all been just crammed into, just too much into one house. And that's my view. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor George. I think the next person in the list was Councillor Bass. Yes.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to, I mean, I too am struggling with this. I mean, obviously, a lot of applying a lot of these rules at the margins are quite subjective. You know, we wouldn't be discussing it at committee unless the officer had recommended it for approval. But then, you know, as we've gone through, a lot of these things are a little bit at the margin. I mean, I have to say, you know, balancing up the house, I think the elevation actually looks quite good when you look straight on from the front. But then I do have an issue with that wraparound single-storey extension, certainly abutting straight up to the boundary of the next door house, because that obviously will have an impact on that. I mean, I don't really think I'd have a problem with it if it was just the flats, you know, above the ground level. And I do think there is a real issue with this sort of going for basements and trying to get as much on as possible. I mean, I just remember one of the houses in Coombe Hill that actually was the iceberg house. They dug a basement and the whole house fell into it. So, but anyway, we go by the engineers and everything. And also my concern is that if we start turning, you know, paragraph 86 of the report says, you know, it's clear that in some respects that it conflicts with the council's residential design SPD, and it's not quite in character with the houses in that road, in that they are mostly single family homes, and there is a precedence if, you know, these houses start being turned into flats. So, and then the other issue I do have, as Councillor Shepherd said, is with the parking. You know, with 6 flats and some of them are quite large, I think it sets a bad precedent that we're expecting some of the capacity to be taken up on the roads. And having parked at the site visit the other day, I couldn't really park right near the house because those spaces were taken up. I had to park a little way away. So I do have concerns about it. It's a difficult one. So that's my view.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wookey.
Yeah, I have concerns about the basement, and I appreciate the fact that if the engineer's report is not satisfactory, then it all has to go back and stop. About the parking, I'm not that bothered, because I know in some areas of Kingston people have 5 or 6 cars. In my area where I live, it's very unusual for there to be more than 1 car in most of the places around us, and I think that there is a fair amount of parking around there. So the parking doesn't bother me. It is just the basement that bothers me, and it would be a lot easier to say yes to this if it wasn't for the basement. But I do like the way it balances the house on the front. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wookey. Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you, Chair. It's a couple of things. Balancing up, just because somebody's done an extension years ago, and actually the Clarences did say it wasn't them that had done the extension; it was previously there. So that doesn't bother me so much as to whether the house is entirely balanced. The parking, I will go back to it. The census data from 2011, so we're 9 years on. So how accurate is that data, really? Councillor Wookey has neighbours who only have 1 car. I've lived in my road for nearly 25 years, and the road has gone from people having 1 or 2 cars up to maybe 4 or 5 per household, because people are having to live, the children are having to live in the homes for much, much longer because they can't afford to move out. So that's something that we need to take into account, because these are there's 2 family flats here, 2 6 people flats. So that's something to think about. I am incredibly concerned about the basement. I don't know what kind of precedent this is setting, but I'm not an engineer. If the engineers say it's fine, then it's fine. But I think that just gives the green light to everybody thinking, great, I'm going to sell my house, and then a developer can come in and build 6 flats with, parking, no parking, but a basement. And I mean, I keep saying it, I don't think we have the infrastructure to even accommodate all this housing that we're supposed to build. And I do have to ask the question, if we weren't in tilted balance, would we be saying yes to basement flats? Because who really wants to live in a basement? Who really wants to live underground? Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's the last person in the list anyway. Oh, Councillor Heap, thank you. Councillor Heap.
Yeah, I'd like to, most of the points that I would have made have been made by Councillors Shepherd, Bass and George and Councillor Wookey. I have great concerns about setting a precedent for a dugout of a basement, and all the other points that were made about parking, sustainability of windows, etc., etc. Thank you.
Thank you. It's probably time, unless anybody else wants to come in or come in afterwards, I'll say a few things. It is right to say, as Councillor Shepherd mentioned, that we're in tilted balance. I always try and leave that to one side when making decisions about which way I vote, but it is worth bearing in mind that we're in tilted balance, and that therefore any harm that the proposals may entail must be both significant and demonstrable and outweigh any of the benefits that the scheme provides. Now, parking, I come back to the fact that the effect on parking has to be severe before we can refuse an application on parking grounds. And I live very close to the application site. I know it very well, and I don't want to second guess the number of vehicles that will be in this development, but it's right to say that family homes may well generate more than 1 car, but 1-bedroom flats may generate no cars at all. And there is, at least in the evening anyway, around here, parking room, much more than in many other areas where more development is permitted. As regards the basement, well, the fact is that we are allowing basements. There's no reason not to allow a basement just in principle. We allowed a basement on 142 Malden Road. We've got another basement to consider later on in this evening. There can be no in principle objection to a basement, so long as the engineering says that it will do no harm, to borrow a phrase. And we have a specific condition which our officer has advised will mean that the applicants are going to have to come up with a plan, which will mean that pumped water from the basement won't lead to runoff into the sewer greater than greenfield runoff. So again, that I think does answer that. Going back to things like the building line, it is a compromise, and I understand Mr. Dunster's objection there. And the issue is really whether you sacrifice the building line for the symmetry aspect, and I do like the symmetry aspect. As regards the extensions at the back, yes, they don't comply technically with our supplementary planning design requirements, but I don't think that causes any significant harm, because there are plenty of other extensions at the back of properties nearby which equally don't, and what the ones suggested don't seem to me to make a significant difference to the characteristics of the area. As regards density, I take into account the fact that, as our officer said, that property is quite near New Malden town centre, and indeed, although Thetford Road going south has many more large houses on big plots, it's not exclusively so. There are flats down there, although maisonette styles generally. Further on Westbury Road, there are a couple of old houses which have been converted into flats a good while ago. Then you get Sable Court, and up Rodney Road, a lot of flatted development. So it really is on the edge of an area of significantly greater density, and I don't see that incremental change. It harms the area to any degree at all. So although I recognise the strength of feeling and the principles involved in these objections, I feel that the benefits of having 5 new homes are such that I will be supporting this approach. In the absence of any other comments, we move to the vote. And here again, I hand over to our Democratic Services Officer to take the vote, which is done by a roll call. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We'll now take the vote by roll call. I'll ask each member in turn whether you wish to vote for, against, or to abstain. After indicating your vote, would each member please confirm that you've been present in the online meeting throughout this item? Thank you. So first, Councillor Bailey.
My vote is for, and I've been present throughout.
Thank you. Councillor Bass.
My vote is against, and I've been here the whole meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
My vote is in favour, and I have indeed been here for the whole meeting.
Thank you. Councillor George.
Hello, I've been here all along, and I'm against. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Haar.
I confirm I've been present for the whole meeting today. I'm voting for against.
Voting against
the
recommendation.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Heap.
I confirm I've been here for the whole meeting, and I'm also voting against.
Thank you. Councillor Hughes.
I've been present for the whole meeting, and I'm voting against.
Thank you. Councillor Ravalia.
I've been present for the whole meeting, and I'm abstaining.
Thank you. Councillor Shepherd.
I've been present for the whole meeting, and I'm voting against.
Thank you. Councillor Wookey.
I've been present for the whole meeting, and I'm voting for.
Thank you. So, Chair, that is 3 for 4, so 3 in favour, 6 against, and 1 abstention.
Thank you very much. In those circumstances, what we have to do now is someone has to propose, if you like, the reverse, that the application be refused, and that has to be seconded. But what the proposer has to do is set out in planning terms the grounds upon which the application should be refused. This isn't if you like, a request for further debate. It's simply a request for those who oppose to set out in clear planning terms the reasons for refusal, so that that can go in a formal document to the applicants. So I need a proposer for the reverse resolution that this application be refused. Councillor George, you wish to propose it?
Yes, I do.
Can you set out the grounds for that proposal?
Yeah, to me, it's overdevelopment. I think there's problems with the density. I'm going to state that, taking into account the local context and character and the suburban character. To me, it doesn't fit in. I think to talk about, like you said earlier, I don't think we can say we just don't want basements. However, I think the amount of development they're putting on here has caused lots of problems around. I think the rear extensions, I haven't got the details in front of me, don't meet the SPD requirements, I think you said earlier. And I don't know if anyone else wants to add anything to that, but I think that's my main concern.
I have a seconder, Councillor Bass. Perhaps Councillor Bass wants to add something.
Yeah, no, I'd also add loss of amenity to local residents, and also that it conflicts with the council's residential design SPD, as mentioned in paragraph 86.
I think that's already been mentioned by Councillor George. That's the rear extensions. Is that what you mean, Councillor Bass?
Yeah, okay. I would like to mention the parking, but on some, I mean, I do think on the parking is quite judgmental about whether it has a significant impact, and I think it probably would have a significant impact having parking.
Well, I think you've got to say it's severe. Actually, you've got to say it's severe.
Okay.
Is it severe? Right. It's up to you. I don't consider it to be severe, as you know, but if you do, then it can go in.
Well, put that in as well, please.
So severe harm for parking. I don't think it's severe loss of amenity. And what loss of amenity do you suggest? I don't think we can just say loss of amenity. We need to specify what amenity has been.
Well, I suppose that's linked to the parking.
Okay, so it's parking.
And sort of noise and, you know, having everything like that.
Noise. Noise from what? From the residents?
Yeah, no, it's mentioned in here.
So I just want to be clear. We're saying that, or you're saying that one of the reasons for refusal is that the residents are likely to cause a lot of noise.
Well, I think Councillor George had the main points of objection.
Okay. So at the moment, I just want to run through it. We've got density, overdevelopment, the rear extension not meeting the council's SPD, and severe harm for parking for local residents. Those are the three which I've got so far. Are there any more? Does anybody want to add any more?
Yes.
Who's that? Sorry, I didn't get that. Councillor Heath, thank you.
Yeah. Hi. Yeah, couple of more things I'd like to add. I know there's community garden there, but lack of private amenity space for 4 out of 6 flats. I think that's quite a lot because obviously they don't have balconies.
Okay. Lack of
If the
amenity space, we can add that. Yep.
Yeah, and within that as well, if there's going to be children in the family flats, which I believe are the 2 basement flats,
There's only one basement flat.
Yeah, the gardens I don't think are going to be sufficient enough, big enough to support the equipment that children seem to have in gardens these days, and therefore my feeling is that wouldn't be able to overspill into the community area, because then the other people in the other flats wouldn't have any private space apart from stuff for children. So that's
you're saying that despite the private rear gardens of the 2 3-bedroom flats being well in excess of guideline rate, the guidance, they're too small. Is that
they're okay for normal sort of gardens, but what about when they start having large pieces of equipment in them? Are they going to be big enough for them? Lots of people have trampolines and things like that in them, but that's just a thought. That's a side issue.
Well, I mean, if you want to put in, we can put in that there's insufficient garden space for the two.
Yeah, I think so, and also
3-bedroom flats.
Yeah.
Two 3-bedroom flats.
I think the lack of insulation is going to be a problem. It's said in the report. I don't know what it was.
We're not building control here.
Okay. Well, sustainability then. I'll go on to the point that Councillor Wookey brought up about they've repaired or they've put in some replacement windows, but they're only single pane glass. I think those aren't adequate for heating insulation, and I think that's a problem as well.
We can put in insufficient CO2 reduction.
Yeah, for that.
Yeah, insufficient CO2 reduction, especially retaining retaining the single glazed windows.
Yeah. It did mention, just to go back to this thing about insulation, you're going to have, the neighbours are going to have bedrooms where number 27 is going to have living accommodation.
I'm sorry, Councillor Heath, this isn't an opportunity for further debate.
I'm not, it's not a debate. Yeah, I'm just mentioning that that isn't acceptable under planning terms.
Well, can you refer to the policy that which that comes under?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay. Now, so, do we want to put anything in about the basement? No. Okay. Well, we won't.
Well, Councillor Chair, would it be possible to ask the officer what wording we can put on for the basement?
I don't know why you're asking.
Yeah.
Because it's technical.
Yeah. Sure. Thomas, can you suggest wording if people want to put in something about the basement?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I can. You could say something along the lines of the applicant has failed to demonstrate that the proposal would not result in increased risk of flooding to the site itself and or elsewhere, depending on what you'd like to say. You could also say that the applicant has failed to demonstrate that a suitable sustainable drainage strategy could be implemented on the site. You could also say that the applicant has failed to demonstrate that the proposals would not give rise to land stability issues or give rise to unacceptable impacts on the amenities of neighbouring occupiers. That would be principally noise if you were to go for anything. But yes, I don't think we could, in light of the evidence that we have from the applicant's consultants, I don't think we could say. I don't think we could say that we've demonstrated that their conclusions are false, but I think we could perhaps say that they haven't gone far enough.
Okay, I think, where are we on?
Chair, if I may, those are really helpful because I have to say Thomas has put into kind of better wording what we were trying to say in a rather clumsy way.
Well, what we've got is on the basement, that they failed to demonstrate that the application will, well, they failed to demonstrate a suitable drainage strategy, comma, failed to demonstrate a that the basement can be built retaining stability. I think that's probably about enough on the basement. And on noise, that can I think what Thomas was saying, that we could say failed to demonstrate that neighbouring amenity will not be harmed by residential noise. I think we can say that too. That will be a separate one, not just in relation to the basement. So on noise, it's failed to demonstrate that the development, the application will not cause unacceptable noise to neighbours. I'll just read those through. Reasons for refusal: density, overdevelopment, rear extension doesn't meet the SBD requirements, severe harm for parking for local residents, lack of private amenity space for 4 of the 6 flats, insufficient garden space for the 2 3-bedroom flats, insufficient CO2 reduction retaining single glazed windows. In regards to the basement, failed to demonstrate the suitable drainage strategy and failed to demonstrate the basement can be built while retaining structural stability, and failed further to demonstrate the application will not cause unacceptable noise. Application will not cause unacceptable noise to neighbours. So I think that's probably pretty comprehensive. We have a proposer and the seconder. So we now have to take the vote again. And so, Thomas, you want to come in?
Right, Chair. Yes, I just want to clarify it should be land stability rather than structural stability.
Okay, land stability, please, rather than structural stability. Well, that can be corrected while we take the vote. So can I have something in from Harsha as well.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to ask really about the sustainability reason for refusal. And in my view, I think that's quite a technical topic area, and I would ask the committee if we could take that one away, draft up a reason for refusal, and you know, perhaps refer back to you, Chair, to firm that one up. As I said, it's a technical one, and I'd feel more comfortable if we could take that particular reason away and firm it up.
Well, I mean, it's not really up to me. It's up to the proposer. That's Councillor George.
That sounds good to me. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, that can come out. So the insufficient CO2 reduction should come out. And if you, Henry, if you could, if it's you who's typing, could you change retaining structural stability to retaining? Oh gosh.
Land stability.
Land stability. Thank you, Thomas.
Actually, Chair, sorry. Could we also add in poor design? Because I think what a lot of us didn't like was the design of the single story.
Poor design of the single story. Okay.
Yeah, we were happy. I think most people were generally happy with the front end elevation when you look straight on, but it was
I mean, that's partly
the other
covered, I
looking
think, with
side.
the,
Poor design of the first floor elevation, or just poor design.
Okay.
In a wording that Thomas is happy with.
Yeah, that's fine. I think we can leave it as it was, Henry. Poor design of the single story extension. And if you could take out the insufficient CO2 reduction on the advice of our senior planner. Okay. So we need another roll call, I'm afraid, on that motion.
Sorry, Chair. Can you just explain what we're voting on now?
It's a motion to refuse. Moved by Councillor George, seconded by Councillor Bass.
Oh.
On the grounds
okay.
that
We'd already done that. Okay.
No, we haven't. We vote. I mean, it's a new procedure where we vote on, but we've got to vote on this. I'm right about that, am I not, Henry? And Fiona, we have to vote on this.
Yes, Chair. Yes, and the question is:
yes,
would you wish to take all on block, or would you wish to take a vote separately on each reason?
Oh goodness, no! We'd be here until midnight.
Yeah.
So we're doing all those reasons, all. So
I'd be okay with it on block. Yeah.
All lumped together, and so can we take that vote now? Because we've got 2 other applications to do.
Thank you, Chair. I'll now take that vote by roll call. So I'll call each member in turn, whether you wish to vote for, against, or to abstain from that. After indicating your vote, would each member please confirm that you've been present throughout this item? So, Councillor Bailey, please.
I'm against, and I've been present throughout.
Thank you, Councillor Bass.
I'm for, and I've been present the whole meeting.
Councillor Edwards.
I'm in favour. I'm against. Sorry, and I've been here throughout.
Councillor George.
I've been here all along, and I'm for. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hart.
I'm sorry. I haven't present for the entire meeting today. I'm against.
Thank you. Councillor Heap. Oh.
I'm voting for, and I've been here for the whole meeting.
Sorry, could you repeat, Councillor Haar? Could you just clarify?
I think, yeah.
I said I'm against.
He doesn't understand.
Okay, Councillor Heap.
I'm voting for the motion, and I've been here throughout the meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes.
I'm voting for the motion and have been here throughout.
Thank you, Councillor Avalia.
I have been present throughout, and I'm abstaining.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd.
I've been here throughout, and I'm voting for.
Thank you, Councillor Wookey.
I've been here for the whole meeting, and I'm voting against.
Thank you, councillors. So that is 5 in favour of the motion, 4 against, and 1 abstention. Chair.
Thank you very much. We'll now move on, I think, to the next item on the agenda, which is we're going to take 27 Pressburg Road next, if that's all right. And I think that means we get a change of officer presenting the item, and that is Harsha Bundia.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just loading up my screen so that I can share the presentation. Hopefully you can see my screen now. No? Okay.
Can't see it. Yes, now I can.
Now it's coming on. Okay, so the next item concerns a two-storey semi-detached property known as 27 Pressburg Road. This is located, the subject site is located on the eastern side of Pressburg Road, as demonstrated by the site plan. The area hatched in red is where the proposed development, or the footprint of the proposed development. In front of you now, you will see an aerial view of the site, again with the application site outlined in red. And now you will see a plan with different colours on it. So the site is located within the Pressburg Road Conservation Area. The conservation area is the area in blue, and the area in yellow is local area special character. So the area in blue shows you the extent of the conservation area. In front of you now, you will see some photographs of the site, including front elevation, rear elevation, side elevation, and a rear elevation here where my pointer is, looking in the direction of 25 Pressburg Road. So as you can see, it's not been extended to the side, this dwelling house. There is a garage on site towards the rear of the site. Again, here's a view of that garage there. You've got some existing plans now in front of you. Existing floor plans, ground and first, loft and roof plan. Existing elevations in front of you. Again, front, rear and side. And now you have some proposed floor plans in front of you. The proposal is for the demolition of the existing garage that I showed you in the photographs earlier, and the erection of a wraparound single-storey side and rear extension. The extension would measure 8 meters wide to the rear, 3.5 meters deep, and the extension would occupy the exact same footprint of a recently approved planning permission. So planning permission has already been granted for a wraparound extension occupying the exact same footprint. The difference between the approved permission and this permission is that this permission seeks a taller extension. The approved extension approves an extension at 3 meters high, whereas this proposal would seek to increase the heights by 60 centimeters. Now here you can see some heights on your screen. The proposal would remain at 3 meters high towards the front part of the extension, but would step up to 3.6 to the side and rear. A side elevation will show a better image of what I'm trying to articulate, which is that the height would remain 3 meters for the first 2.6 meters of the extension before stepping up to 3.6 for the remainder of the extension. So this is a side plan. You've got, for the benefit of committee, I have reproduced copies of the extant and approved planning permission for, as I said, an extension occupying the same footprint, but at a lower height at 3 meters. And these plans are in front of you now. And the recommendation is to approve the planning permission for the wraparound side and rear extension. Although I should just clarify that there is in the late material, I wish to clarify that paragraph 8 explains that the height of the proposed extension would be the same as the approved extension. So that's not quite correct. The approved extension would actually be, in fact, 60 centimeters taller for the most part. So that wording has been clarified in the late material. However, the recommendation, as I said, is to approve subject to conditions as set out within the officer's report.
Thank you very much, Harsha. We now move to the next stage, which is for the, we got an objector, Mr. Paul Dennett, and I'd ask our Democratic Services officers to arrange for Mr. Dennett to be connected and invite him to speak for 5 minutes, or up to 5 minutes, in relation to this application. So over to you, Henry, to introduce Mr. Dennett.
Thank you, Chair. We have one registered objector for this item. Welcome, Paul Dennett. Please can you now address the committee with your comments? You are reminded that you have 5 minutes to speak. We will let you know when you have 1 minute remaining and when your time is up. Thank you.
Good evening, councillors. My family and I live at number 25 next door to the applicant. And I note the applicant's medical statement and the need for higher ceilings in some rooms. In the planned side extension, the rooms needing these high ceilings total only 13 metres squared and could readily be accommodated in the over 200 metres squared of the updated house without the need for any overheight side extension that fails to meet most of the SPD. It is a conscious design choice to locate them in the side extension, so this should not outweigh our right to be protected by your planning rules. I will describe later an alternative extension design that meets your planning rules and also the needs of this applicant. With respect to height, this application is 3.6 metres high. It also has a pitched central glass ridge, taking the actual height to 4 metres, which is not addressed in the planning officer's report. An earlier version of this application had a 3.8 metre height, which was rejected by planning officers for the stated reason of exceeding 3 metres. That reason for rejection should now be restated. There is no logic to reversing it. All other side extensions in this consultation area are 1.5 or half a metre to 1 metre lower than this one. This application has a design form that is not seen anywhere else in the area. The strange step up in roof heights will look terrible. It fails to meet the council's own guidance requiring good architecture and should be refused on these grounds. A much more appropriate design form with a pitched roof is available in the SPD, and number 28 across the road have submitted an application for side extension with a pitched roof that meets these guidelines. The new wall next to the neighbour's windows is only 2.6 metres high, not 3.6 as this one is, and then the pitched roof attached to the existing house at a higher level, so there is no sudden change in ceiling height from the original house. This meets the stated need of the applicant and would minimise light and visual impact on my family. With respect to light at our property, a right to light surveyor has advised that the council rules do apply and that the proposal is likely to impact on the light enjoyed by our windows. I do not understand why this has been ignored by the planning officers and why a proper assessment has not been done. With respect to light in the applicant's new side extension, the SPD states that where any new habitable rooms will be created, the designer should ensure that they receive direct sunlight for at least a part of the day. According to the lighting assessments upon which your council guidance is based, these new rooms will receive no direct sunlight at all due to the new obstruction angle created to number 25, and this is not addressed anywhere in the planning officer's report. The application should be refused on these grounds. And finally, with respect to our outlook at number 25, the SPD states the need to maintain a reasonable outlook for neighbouring properties. The level of our house is 300 to 400 millimetres lower than number 27. Despite raising this on every version of this extension, it has never been considered in any of the planning reports or corrected on the drawings. This is obviously significant to our outlook, as it is not a 3.6 metre wall we'll be looking at, but effectively a 4 metre high one. A 4 metre high wall directly adjacent to our outdoor sitting area and only 2.2 metres from our windows. It will affect our outlook, and it would be unreasonable to say otherwise.
1 minute remaining.
So in conclusion, this proposal fails the council's own height requirements, lighting tests for neighbours, light requirements for newly created rooms, and good design criteria. It also results in a significant worsening of our outlook. There are so many exceptions to the planning rules that the decision to approve it could not be balanced or proportionate, and would create an unwelcome and unacceptable precedent for future applications. I ask that the committee reject this application and encourage the applicant to pursue a solution that meets the rules and works for everyone. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dennett. Now we have the applicants, and the applicants are, let me see, there's Mr. and Mrs. Tapper and Farid Mir, their agent. Between them, they have 5 minutes to address us. And Henry, again, can you introduce them, please?
Thank you, Chair. So Farid Mia has registered to speak on behalf of the applicant tonight. Welcome to the meeting. Please, can you now address the committee with your comments? You're reminded that you have 5 minutes to speak. We will let you know when you have one minute remaining and when your time is up. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. This is Farid speaking here. Just wanted to clarify on some of the points that the neighbour at number 25 had made in his objections and comments. There was a point made about the roof lantern at the back of the property being 4 meters high. At present, we have already had an approval for this particular roof lantern, and it is set away from the boundary of the rear extension and centralised. What we had approved under the planning application previously was a 3 meter wraparound extension, which had passed the 45-degree angle rule from a 2 meter high fence at the boundary line. The necessity of having this 0.6 meter increase in height was due to a family member with a disability, whereby they needed this because of sensory abilities, whereby they would not be able to use spaces where they felt it was different for them. And that was one of the reasons why we went back into planning to ask for an extra 0.6 meters, especially where the side extension lies. This would become a sensory room for the disabled individual that lives at number 27. The 25-degree and 45-degree lines that were made objections on by the neighbouring objector at number 25, Paul, seem to have been kind of addressed by the council's planning officer, Carmelina, in her report, suggesting that this wouldn't cause loss of outlook or loss of daylight, considering that the existing building and the gap between the two houses already causes a daylight issue in the first place. The side window, which I believe is the window that the neighbouring property has objected about, and in terms of the outlook, loss of amenity and daylight issues in particular, is an identical side bay window that we have on our side, which at the moment can be overlooked into as it is at this present time. Given the fact that we would potentially be able to put up a 2 meter fence on our side of the land under permitted rules, and considering if the land was shorter or kind of lower on number 25 side, then that 2 meter fence would be almost 2.3 to 2.4 meters in front of this bay window. So therefore, if you were standing internally inside the room of that particular house looking out, you would only see the top of the extension and mostly the fence that would be in front of this bay window. So the points that and objections that number 25 has made so far, I would say, in my opinion, are not sort of valid because of the fact that there are some obstacles that could be put in the way, and we're not really changing much in terms of what you can actually visually see.
1 minute remaining.
As at the moment, the only visual kind of impact that they have at present time is actually looking into number 27's bay window at present. So that's on the points made with outlook and loss of amenity and so on. The final point just wanted to make is that obviously the reason for us applying for this 0.6 meters was solely based on the amenity use of an individual in the property number 27, and based on the national policy framework, and in particular with able to use the houses safely, we have decided to go ahead with this application and try and see whether we can get an approval for the sole and safety of that individual and his use and ability to use the space. Thank you for your time. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So far as the next stage of the proceedings is concerned, just as we had before, there's an opportunity for councillors to ask questions of both of the objectors, or the objector, I should say, and the applicant's agent. We start off with the questions by councillors of the objector, Mr. Dennett, and I'll first ask people, any of the councillors, to put in the chat function if they wish to ask any questions of Mr. Dennett. Can you please indicate? I don't have any, and I don't have any questions myself. If there are none, the next is if anybody has any questions of Mr. Meir, the applicant's agent. Again, could you indicate if you have in the chat function? And nobody has. Oh, yes, there are. There's a question from Councillor Shepherd. So, Councillor Shepherd, over to you. And there's a 5-minute allowed for this period of the proceedings, starting from when you speak, please, Councillor.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's just a very quick question relating to the height of the room that's required. Is that in line with the height of the rest of the house, the height of the rooms in the rest of the house?
Thank you. A very straightforward question. Mr.
Yes, basically, originally we had a pre-app meeting with Kingston Council, and the very first application that we applied for was based on the original heights of the Pressburg Road properties, whereby they have very high ceilings. We were kind of constricted when we did get approval, and that was only because the owners and the applicant didn't really want to provide the sensitive issue of their son being disabled. Given that they found out from their health visitors that the son won't be able to use these spaces, they had no choice but to apply for this extra height to match with the existing ceiling levels in the house. And yeah, the heights was greater than what we had originally been approved.
Thank you. I think that does answer the question. Councillor Shepherd, any other questions of the objectors, sorry, of the applicant's agent? And as I said, I don't have any. So I think that is all the questions. So thank you, Mr. Meir and Mr. Dennett. If that's your part of this meeting over, if you could leave the meeting now, and I'm sure you will want to watch it on the YouTube channel, if you can rejoin that way, because as I said, it helps with unlighting. So the next stage is our planning officer, Harsha Bundia, to sweep up, and I'd like you, if you could, to address in particular what Mr. Dennett said about conflicts between the plan and the application, I should say, and our residential supplementary planning document. Harsha.
Thank you, Chair. I will do that. And I, with your permission, would like to bring up the presentation again, because I think it will be easier to explain it using the plans. So yes, to sweep up then, on the comment particularly that the extension doesn't meet most of the SPD. Well, in my opinion, the extension meets most of the residential design supplementary planning document, and I will demonstrate how it does in many respects meet the SPD. So the SPD requires, actually before I go any further, hopefully everyone can see this plan with the dimensions on it. Yes, okay, although I'll load it to full screen, apologies. But for instance, the residential design SPD requires extension to be set in at least 250 millimetres from the shared boundary, and in this regard, the extension will be set in at least a metre. The SPD also says that extension shouldn't be more than half the width of the house, and again, it complies in that regard. Now, the SPD does recommend, or rather, it doesn't recommend heights of up to 3.6. However, the height is lowered at the front portion so as to try and reduce the impact on the street scene, and steps up further back. And in this regard, it technically doesn't meet the SPD. In regards to the depth of the rear element, it does again meet the SPD. So the rear element projects 3.5 metres, and again the SPD permits extensions between 3 to 3.5 metres on the boundary. So in many respects, the extension would meet the SPD. Another way it also would meet is that it would have matching materials, and it goes so far as to try and replicate this dog tooth brickwork detail on the front elevation. And again, that's another way where, as I said, in my opinion, it does meet the SPD. The height, officers acknowledge it wouldn't, but officers have assessed the impact of the increased height on character and appearance and neighbouring amenity, and indeed heritage assets, and conclude that the impact would not be negative. In regards to light impacts, I'd like to add that officers have considered the impact of the proposed extension on the neighbouring window at number 25, and we have assessed it against baseline conditions already. For instance, the two-storey house itself, the permitted extension, so fallback has been considered, and of course the increase in height. So taken together, we have assessed the impact on that window. And I should point out that the SPD doesn't say that there can be no change to light levels in neighbouring properties, or no impact. The SPD says there must not be any unacceptable or unreasonable loss of light or impacts of that nature, and recommends, the SPD recommends certain tools that we could use whilst making our assessment, which is the so-called 25-degree rule. And again, as I said, officers have applied that rule and conclude that the impact in terms of outlook and daylight sunlight would not be significant over and above existing baseline conditions. And as I said, what could be erected here in terms of the extant planning permission. So officers can conclude that the development taken as a whole, i.e. impact on character and appearance, impact on heritage assets, i.e. the Pressburg Road conservation area, and impact on the amenity of neighbouring occupiers would be acceptable, and accordingly recommend approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Harsha. The next stage is questions from members of the committee. I note that Councillor Hughes has had to withdraw from the meeting because he's feeling indisposed. that obviously means that he won't be taking any further part in these proceedings unless he comes back for the next application. Does anybody have questions of the officer? If so, can you please indicate that in the chat function? Whilst people are thinking about that, I've got one. It just follows up, Harsha, from what you were saying about the way in which the design, the application doesn't conform to the residential design supplementary document. I didn't quite catch, perhaps my connection wasn't absolutely 100% at the time, what the guidance says the height to which it says you should build, so that we can, is it 3 meters or is it something else?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Apologies for the connection issues. Yeah, I'm afraid my Wi-Fi has been playing up all day. Yes, so as you know, the height is 3 meters. The height of the proposed extension is 3 meters at the front, and then it steps up to 3.6. And the residential design SPD would recommend extension heights of, it would recommend different heights for parapet walls and for the overall eaves height and overall height of the extension, which would not be quite as high as 3.6. I believe it's 3.3 to a, but I'm just sort of double checking this measurement because I'm questioning myself.
Yep. Best get it right.
Best get it right. Of course, I can do this if there are other questions for me.
Are we questioning the? Sorry, Chair, are we questioning the SPD guidance for the height of extension?
Yeah.
Is 3 meters for a flat roof, 3.3 for a parapet, and 4 for a pitched?
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Councillor George.
Just a very quick one, I think. The objector sort of mentioned, and I didn't pick it up at the time because I didn't think it's necessary to. He mentioned that actually there was no need to raise the height in that part of the building as it was higher elsewhere, and they could just use that elsewhere. Presumably, that's not a good reason to take into account it when deciding on an application. You have to deal with what's in front of us, presumably.
Thank you, Chair. I'll come in. We have to assess the application based on the information submitted. Now, we have had, we're aware of the circumstances of the family, and you know, they have submitted details in regards to why the extra height is needed. You know, officers have considered, as I said, assessed the extension in terms of character and appearance, impact on heritage, and on residential amenity, and on those aspects we consider it to be acceptable. Therefore, we haven't had to give weight or consideration to the personal circumstances of the family. I think if we found ourselves in a different situation, the report would address that and would address it differently.
Thank you. Is anybody else? Does anybody else want to ask questions of the officer? Okay, that sounds like a no. Thank you, Harsha. Obviously, there may be further points that come up during the debate, if any. The next stage is for me formally to propose the recommendation that you have just made. Can I have a seconder for that, please?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Thank you. We now move to Councillor Debate. I'd invite anybody who wants to contribute to the debate to put their name in the chat function, please. whilst people are thinking about that, I mean, obviously, those of us who went on the site visit saw it, and I know other councillors will have gone to see it privately. My own impression is that the step up from 3 metres to 3.6 metres as visible from the road will be barely noticeable. That's my own impression, and so I can't, from that point of view, I'm not unhappy with it. In relation to the amenity loss suffered by Mr. Dennett from his property, obviously we have to bear in mind that what's being considered here is an increase from 3 to 3.6 metres, 600 millimetres, and my impression is that that won't actually make a vast amount of difference. My feeling was that what Mr. Dennett was principally saying was an objection to what was proposed initially, rather than necessarily what was being proposed now. Having said that, I do understand his points that about the extra 600 millimetres, but my own impression is that that shouldn't make a huge amount of difference to the amenity of his property. So I think I'm in favour of this. But if there's nobody else who wants to contribute to the debate, we can move to the vote. And I would invite Henry Yellop to conduct that vote.
Thank you, Chair. So we'll now take the vote by roll call. So I'll ask each member in turn whether they wish to vote for, against, or to abstain. After indicating your vote, would each member please confirm that you've been present in the online meeting throughout this item? So first, Councillor Bailey.
For, and I've been present throughout.
Thank you. Councillor Bass.
For, and I've been present throughout.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
For, and I've been present throughout.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor
George.
Yep, for, and I've been here all along.
Thank you. Councillor Ha.
I'm for. I confirm I have been present for the whole meeting today.
Thank you. Councillor Heap.
I vote for, and I've been here throughout the meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Hughes is currently absent. Councillor Avalia.
For, and I confirm I've been here throughout the meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Shepherd.
I vote for, and I have been present throughout the meeting.
Thank you. And lastly, Councillor Wookey.
For, and I've been here for the whole meeting.
Thank you. So in total, that's 9 in favour. That's unanimous. Thank you.
Chair, you're on silent.
Thank you again, Councillor Bass. I was just thanking you, but perhaps you were able to read my lips. Yes, thank you for both alerting me to the fact that I was on mute, and also to the fact that when we speak, and indeed preferably throughout, councillors should have their cameras on, and particularly when we're voting. I'd just like to pass on my best wishes to Councillor Hughes, who's fallen ill, and to wish him a swift recovery. Obviously, if people's cameras aren't working, then they can't be switched on. And sometimes, of course, also, it's fair to say that with Wi-Fi connections and the internet such as it is, sometimes having a camera off will actually mean that you can hear things better and be better able to participate in the meeting that way. So can we therefore move to the last item on the agenda, which is Hampton at Coombe Ridings, and I again invite Harsha. I think it's Harsha to present this application.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just wait till my presentation kicks in. I assume you can't see my screen. Oh, no, you can. So this application concerns concerns Hampton Coombe Ridings. It is for the demolition of the existing single-storey dwelling and garage and erection of a two-storey dwelling with basement and garage, rooms in the roof space, basement linked to an enclosed single-storey swimming pool, outbuilding and associated landscaping. In front of you now, you will be able to see just lost the site. Oh, so here is a site plan of the subject site. You can see that it's outlined in red, and you have a sense of the immediate surrounding context. Similar sized plots with quite generous sized dwellings. Now you will see in front of you an aerial view of the application site. And here is a bird's eye view of the application site and as it currently stands. The site falls within a strategic area of special character. It does not fall within a conservation area. There are no listed buildings within the vicinity of the site, but there is a locally listed building with the green square on it where my pointer is currently hovering. The application site is with the pin and the arrow, which is where, again, my pointer is hovering. The site is covered by a blanket TPO, which is again here, and there are individual TPO trees with solid green circles, as you can see on the plan. Here are some photographs of the existing site. Members will be familiar if they've visited. View of the front elevation, view towards Tara, that was, Foxgrove, and I will just quickly get through these. Existing floor plan of the single-storey house, roof plan, existing front elevation, southeast, west. So to recap, the proposal is for the demolition of the existing bungalow and garage and erection of a replacement 5-bedroom dwelling house with an outbuilding to accommodate a swimming pool. The house would occupy a gross internal floor area of 1,285 square meters, 570 square meters of outdoor amenity space, and 5 off-street car parking spaces, including the garage. Here is a proposed site plan of the proposed dwelling. You've got the parking spaces or cars indicating where the parking spaces are, the location of the outbuilding and swimming pool. You've also got an outline here of the existing house to be demolished. So you've got an overlay of proposed and existing here. And of course, sorry, I should use this opportunity to point out the distance of the proposed dwelling to Tara, the neighbouring site, which is 16.8 metres here, and 9.39 metres from the house to the house at Foxgrove. Here is a proposed basement floor plan containing recreational rooms, gym, dressing room, guest room, changing room, cinema room. Proposed ground floor plan contains the main living space, and first floor plan with some of the bedrooms and further bedrooms up in the loft. Here is a roof plan, and now in front of you, you have elevations of the proposed dwelling house. This is the proposed front elevation, proposed rear elevation, northwest, and the other flank elevation. These are elevations of the outbuilding to contain the swimming pool or pool house. And this is the garage elevations in front of you. I I skipped that quite quickly, so I'll slow down. And proposed street scene here, so to assist with working out sort of heights in relation to neighbouring properties. We've added these red lines to show you that the proposed roof ridge would be no higher than Tara next door, and again eaves height would be very similar to Tara here, but of course the dwelling would be taller than Foxgrove, but there is clearly a difference in land levels in the street. Proposed street elevation again. Also, this is very helpful to show land levels and of course the slope of the land from Tara down towards Foxgrove. And the recommendation is to approve the application subject to conditions set out in the report, and to delegate to the head of development management any changes to conditions as required. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Harsha. And now, as there are no registered speakers on this item, we will move straight to the next stage of these proceedings, which is for questions of the officer from members of the committee. So can you indicate in the chat function if you have any questions of the officer? Councillor George, you have a question.
Yes, please. Just a quick one. I think I probably know the answer, really. I'm looking at the report. It's got reasons for why people are, or some people are concerned about it. It says excessive scale, bulk and mass. Oh, I think people. I'll just wait till the officer comes back, shall I?
Councillor George, I can't hear you. Councillor George, I can't hear you anymore.
No, I think the officer's gone. That's the only thing. It was a question of the officer, really.
Councillor George, I can field the question.
Okay. Okay, sorry about that. It's reasons for opposing it. There's loss of daylight and sunlight, loss of privacy, undue enclosure of Foxgrove, and that in a way, these are very different to the sorts of houses we've been looking at earlier today. I just wondered whether we could take that into account, or whether, you know, basically a distance between a house is the same. We have to count it the same whether it's in a place like this, where there's these big houses with generally big gaps between them, or the same as we had earlier with sort of rows of houses quite close to each other. Can we take that into account, or?
Well, the standards within the SPD and the planning policies remain the same between each application. However, we do also have to take into account local character and the typical relationships that you find in the area the application site is in. So we would treat it slightly differently, because here, unlike the cases that we considered previously, houses tend to be set on spacious plots. They are laid out much more generously. So you can take that into account, yes. Although I would say that that has been taken into account in officers' assessment. And the conclusion that is that it wouldn't unduly enclose neighbouring properties, principally because there is a significant amount of breathing space between these properties. The main impact perhaps would be from the proposed replacement garage. However, because that's being brought forward from where it currently is, and the proposed garage is lower in height, the conclusion is that it will actually, if anything, probably have slightly less impact than the existing garage. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor George. I think yours was the only question. Other people want to make a comment. Before we move on to comments, if there are no more questions, I need formally to move the recommendation, and I do so. Can I have a seconder for that, please?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Heap. We now move to the debate, and the first person who wants to make a comment, I think, is Councillor Bass.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, as you know, I went on the site visit with you and other councillors yesterday. Seems a long time ago, but I think it was yesterday. And obviously, as a local councillor for Coombe Hill, I know this area very well. I mean, I do understand the objections that have come in, because obviously at the moment it's a bungalow and it is a sizable change to what's there at the moment. But however, knowing the size of the other houses on this road and nearby roads, the size of the house isn't really out of keeping with other examples in the nearby area. And I think the diagram that the officer showed was actually was quite helpful, because it did show the distances and the heights. So although personally I'm not happy with this, increased, scale of massive housing in Coombe Hill, which we've seen in a few places, I can't think of any sort of relevant planning objections that I could actually hook onto this to actually be a reason for refusal. So I will be approving it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bass. That's very clear. Councillor Wookey.
Yes, I will be voting to approve it, but I just wanted to register the fact that I think it's hideous. Thank you.
Equally clear. Thank you very much. If there are no further comments, and I don't think I could improve on what Councillor Bass has said, I wouldn't want to say it's hideous, but I think I agree with everything that Councillor Bass has said with respect to her. And so we now can move to a vote. So Henry, can I ask you to take the roll call again?
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm that when people do respond to the roll call, to turn their cameras on, if they haven't done so already. So I'll ask each member in turn whether you wish to vote for, against, or to abstain. After indicating a vote, would each member please confirm that you've been present in the online meeting? So firstly, Councillor Bailey.
I'm voting against, and I have been present throughout.
Thank you. Councillor Bass.
I'm voting for, and I've been present the whole meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
I'm voting for, and I've been present throughout.
Thank you. Councillor George.
Voting for and been present throughout. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Ha.
I'm voting for. I have attended the whole meeting today.
Thank you. Councillor Heap.
I'm voting for, and I've been present throughout the meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Hughes is still absent. Councillor Ravalia.
Voting for, and I've been present throughout.
Thank you. Councillor Shepherd.
I'm voting for, and I've been present throughout.
Thank you. And lastly, Councillor Wookey.
I'm voting for, and I've been present throughout.
Thank you. So that is 8 in favour and 1 against. Chair, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you very much. That recommendation therefore is agreed. There have been no urgent items proposed, nor indeed authorised, or exempt business, and therefore I'm going to close this meeting at 7 minutes past 10. I'd like to thank everybody for their presence, the officers' help, and for the great care and attention they've taken over all 3 of these applications. Thank you for your attendance tonight. Thank you everybody who's been watching, and good night.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you, Chair. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Good night.